Hello and welcome to our Bible study. We've got two more sessions, counting today, on our topic about faith and healing and what that means to us. We've covered a number of topics so far. We've talked about what healing is, what a miracle is, what wellness is, what illness is. All of these different things have played a role in our discussion. Today, we're talking about what our role is in that discussion. What role do we play in our own healing and in our own miracle that takes place? And so there's a few questions we really need to ask ourselves is what do you think the role of faith is in healing? What role does it play in the whole concept of healing and whatever that concept of healing may mean to you? How do you think touch relates to healing? And now that's a big thing, and that's what's made this whole issue kind of hard on me. Part of the way I was trained and taught was the theology of touch. What that means is that you hug, you touch, you shake hands, you do all these things to make connection with people, and you do this because it helps us remember that we are all one in the bond of love. So this whole new idea of not shaking hands, this whole new idea of constantly always being at least 6 feet apart, although probably better as far as just pure old scientific health is concerned, it's not better in theological concepts or in social concepts because we are still social creatures. We are a herd. And with that in mind, we have to have contact. That's one of the things we're seeing right now in our society is the fact that people are having a lot of trouble with the lack of contact, whatever that may be. And so it's coming out sometimes in some very negative ways. All right. What do you think our culture's fears around this issue of touching are? And this is extremely important for us right now. If you show some kind of affection, if you show some kind of touching, is it a is, we've started teaching kids good touch and bad touch, and a lot of times these things can wind up being very misunderstood. There was a time many years ago when I was at a church camp and I was working with a bunch of kids. They were probably third or fourth graders. They were young. And I had a little girl. Now, for those of you who really don't know who I am, I'm 6 foot tall and weigh anywhere around, right now, I weigh about 250, 260 pounds. At that time, I was probably closer to about 280. So I'm a big guy. And this little girl just kind of veered in front of me. And I just, without even thinking, I just kind of moved her over so that I wouldn't step on her. And she looked at me and she said, you're not supposed to touch me. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry for that. I didn't mean anything by it, but I didn't want to step on you. Now, by the end of the week, the little girl was sitting in my lap while we were having sing along. So uh, it was a matter of trust. It was a matter of getting to know me. And all of a sudden, when she saw the other kids interacting with me, she felt more comfortable in interacting with me as well. But right now, we're teaching people to be afraid of one another, that everything has an ulterior motive, that everything, excuse me, can have uh, other repercussions and other meanings. And in many cases, we're afraid to touch people. We're afraid to touch children. We're afraid to touch women. We're afraid to touch even men because, oh, well, hey, what does that mean when he gave me a hug? Sometimes it just means he's giving you a hug. But we're dealing with a new world in a new context. And we're not going to come up with all the answers right now. But we hopefully can start asking some of the questions so that we can develop in our own minds the answers. Okay. When has touch made a difference in your well being? When has someone touching you, shaking your hand, hugging you, when has that made a difference in your life? And is there someone who could use healing touch right now in your life? And there's actually a lot of people. I've been doing a lot of funerals lately, and I've been doing funerals for people who are not church members or family members of various churches. And they're looking for somebody to kind of help them through this process of grieving and they don't have the background. They don't have the infrastructure that so many of us have had our whole lives. And so now all of a sudden, even worse is this time when you can't bring in other friends and family to help you with this. So, do you know someone who could actually use a hug or some kind of gentle touch? Uh, what actions do you take to contribute to the wellness, to your wellness? I mean, do you take supplements? Do you have meditation? Do you take time to pray or sing or have these moments where you can actually work on your own well-being in your own place? So, what are those actions? And what more could you do or would you do if you just could? Are there more trusting and more suspicious? Uh, Pardon me, let me start that all over. Are you more trusting or are you more suspicious as you get older? And once again, this is a very important question for where we are in our lives right now. Are we more trusting? Are we more suspicious? Why isn't that person wearing a mask? Why is that person wearing a mask? What do I do with someone who is from a different gender than myself, or a different economic status than myself, or a racial status of myself? How do I interact and react to all of these issues that are happening? Uh, if you if you're more trusting, what has helped you to prepare to be more trusting? What have you done to build that up in your life? And if you're more suspicious, what has happened for that to take place in your life? And finally, is there uh, a hem on a garment for you somewhere? Is there something or someone you need to reach out and touch? Now that's coming. That'll make a lot more sense when I read the Bible passage to you. We're talking about the woman who touches Jesus's garments as he's passing by. And let me go ahead and read that to you. It's out of Mark. It's Mark 5:25 through 31, and then we're going to drop down and read 33 and 34. Once again, this is out of the New Revised Standard Version. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians and had spent all that she had, and she was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, for she said to herself, "If I but touch his clothes, I will be made well." Immediately her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt it in her body, and she was healed of her disease. Immediately aware that the power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned around to the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" Now the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before him, and told him the whole truth. And Jesus said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." So we have these issues that happen in our lives. We all know of people in our lives that are dealing with uh, terminal illness, whether it be cancer, whether it be heart failure, whether it be uh, lupus, or any of these other diseases that have become so prevalent in our lives. Even a peanut allergy. I have a colleague here in the community who is so deathly allergic to peanuts that even if you just open a jar and she walks in the room, her throat starts to swell shut and she has to leave. How do we handle that? How do we handle our own lives? How do we find that place where we, first of all, acknowledge that we cannot do this ourselves, that we need some kind of help, that we need to reach out to someone or something, some greater power. Now, that greater power uh, ultimately is God, but that greater power can take many forms. Maybe the greater power is the local church. Maybe the greater power is a card club or a Bible study or somewhere where you're able to reach out and help and have someone help you carry the burden that you have. And this burden can take many different forms and many different shapes. As a matter of fact, this is exactly what AA and NA and all the other 12-step organizations are built on. They're building on the foundation stone that you cannot and must not try to shoulder the burden alone, that you do it with others, that people who have gone that same journey and gone that same route. And it's important that we remember that Jesus continues to say, "Go, your faith has made you whole." That there's a part of this that is us. It's our accepting of our weakness. It's our accepting of the blessing, whatever that may be, and however that may take place. But it's also our understanding that there is a greater community. There is a greater need to have something more than ourselves. Part of the problem that we have with the whole lockdown issue right now is the fact that we're basically having to be armies of one. If you remember a number of years ago, that was kind of the slogan the U.S. Army had for a little while, that they'll make you an army of one. Well, that is important that they teach independence and they teach self-reliance, but the reality is what makes an army are the units. It's the squads, it's the platoons, it's the companies, it's the connections and the interrelationship that you have with one another. One of the things that we've learned over the years is that although all these great ideas are important for building an army or going to war or anything like that, God and country, the flag, mother, apple pie, ultimately what makes a soldier fight as hard as they can is the person beside them, the person that is their buddy, the person that has been there with them, the person that is depending on them and they depend on. And so we have this same connection now also, not only with God, but with one another. We have this interconnection and we have this um, bond that actually pulls us together and keeps us from going too far astray. And that's an important concept for us to wrap our minds around. It's something that we need to hold on to, especially right now, that not only are we not alone, but we're there not just for ourselves, but for others, that we are reaching out to others and we are helping them with whatever their situation is. A good example are the masks that we're all supposed to be wearing right now. And the thing that you have to remember is they've been very clear from the beginning. The mask is not going to protect you from coronavirus. What the mask does is protect other people from you. And when they wear their mask, they're protecting you from the others or from themselves. So it's not that we need the mask for ourselves, it's that we need to wear the mask for others. Other people are depending on us. They're depending that we will make good choices about our own lives so that we will not make them sick, whether it be, in my case, my 80-year-old mother with Parkinson's disease, or maybe you have a child who has asthma, or all these people that are at risk. When we go out into the world, we may not be at risk, but we can become asymptomatic, or asymptomatic rather, pardon me, and we may actually bring something home that we don't even know we have. And so this is extremely important. It's extremely important for me as a minister because I may not, and I am not worried about my own health. I'm not worried about my own death. Frankly, it does not concern me in the least because I, strangely enough, believe all this stuff we talk about on Sunday morning. That said, I am deathly afraid of bringing something to my church who is an older congregation. Both the churches I serve, Christ Creek Presbyterian down the road and Trinity United Church of Christ here, both of these churches have older, compromised people. We actually have some young kids that are compromised as well. And I do not wish to make them sick. I do not wish to weaken them or to cause problems. And so while I make my decisions for myself, I have to remember that my actions interact with the actions of others. And so it is my duty to be part of the miracle of not making them sick in the first place and to be there for them as they find themselves in whatever situation they are, to reach out to them and touch them, whether it be symbolically or physically or emotionally or spiritually, All of these different ways of making connection. We have this availability now. And so we stretch out and we reach out and we touch one another. Now, the touch is extremely important, but it comes back down to what faith do you have? Are you faithful enough to make yourself whole? And when you understand wholeness, are you talking about just being physically well, or are you talking about being emotionally and spiritually and mentally well? Are you maybe comfortable with whatever has been laid upon your shoulders, whatever that may be? Are you able to move forward with those issues? When we wrap our minds around this, when we start accepting those things that we cannot change, and also accepting the things that have been changed around us, then we too find our home. We too find our peace, our center. The Shakers have a song that has become very popular over the years in other denominations. The Shakers were a former denomination that basically just died out. But you've heard of the song, "Tis a Gift to Be Simple, 'Tis a Gift to Be Free." And in that song at the end, it says, turn, turn, and sooner or later you find out where you're supposed to be. I'm kind of paraphrasing, but the point is all the things that happen in life, all the labyrinths that we find ourselves walking on, in the end, we find ourselves in the presence of God. When we become comfortable and associated with that concept, then we're able to move forward. We have next week when we're going to talk about our gratitude. And then we'll go on another journey, whatever that may be. Once again, I invite you to leave your comments below. Remember that this is a very global community. You're not just talking to me, you're talking to everyone. And so, with that in mind, and there may be someone who sees this 5, 10 years down the road, they may run across this somewhere along the way on their journey, that the comments that you leave are constructive and that they will help not only in your life but in the lives of others. Until next time, go with God and go in peace. And let's close with a word of prayer. Gracious God, we thank you for the fact that the miracles do take place in our lives. Sometimes the miracle is acceptance. Sometimes the miracle is actual physical healing. We pray that your touch will always be felt and that you will make us the brave and bold to touch those around us and to accept the touch of others, that we too can make ourselves whole through our faith in you. We ask these things humbly in your name. Amen. Hope you have a good week, and I'll see you next time.